Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I'm finally going to be doing my last update for the Nonfiction Reading Challenge of 2019. This year I made a challenge for myself to read more broadly within nonfiction, and so I created sort of small challenges in order to inspire me to test new things within the very broad thing that is nonfiction. And I made specific challenges and I've talked about all of them in an announcement video which will be linked in the description below, as well as the playlist that I've done for all of the videos related to this challenge throughout the year of 2019. I've made two previous update videos that I've talked about 6 of the books that I've read for the challenge. I'm not going to go into those here. These are going to be the 10 last books for the challenge. So I think next year I'm going to be a lot more sort of structured with the way I do my videos in connection with the year-long reading challenge. But this year was sort of a trial thing, so I wasn't planning ahead and didn't really have a schedule for how I wanted things to be. But today basically I wanted to talk through the 10 books that I've read for the challenge that I haven't talked about already, and to talk about the way that they fit within the challenges. I've already done an announcement video for the 2020 reading challenge called Curious Adventure. I will link again that video in the description below. I hope that you will take this sort of free flow interpretation of the challenges as a cue for you to really make the challenges your own in the next year as well. I hope that they are more fun rather than restricting. But let's get into the books because we have 10 books to get through. So one of the challenges was to read a microhistory of an object, and for that I read Word by Word by Kory Stomper, which is a book all about dictionaries and how they are made. So this is a book, basically a memoir of someone who works as a lexicographer. It's all of like the actual inner workings of a dictionary creation, and I found it fascinating. I love linguistics stuff anyway, so I think if you're at all interested in linguistics and especially the English language, then you'll probably enjoy this. It's very niche, I think, but that is one of its appeals in my opinion. Another challenge was to read a book that was published by a uni press, but I also added an alternative way of doing this challenge by reading a book published by an indie press, and I decided to go with that for myself, and that is Waterfalls of Stars by Roseanne Alexander, My 10 Years on the Island of Skoma. This was published by Siren Press. I will link their website below, and this is a book about the author living on a small island called Skoma for 10 years as a warden together with her boyfriend, then to be husband, and she narrates the natural world around her and the nature that she is sort of embedded in during this decade of her life, and it's a beautiful book. I really strongly recommend it, especially if you're someone who loves nature writing, but even if you're someone who likes memoir as a genre, I think this is a wonderful example of the genre. So I would strongly recommend this. I loved it, and I'm so glad that I picked this up on Charlotte's from Tired Mama Tries to Read recommendations. I will link her channel below as well. The next challenge I want to talk about is reading a nonfiction pop science book. And this was actually one of the ones that I had more of a challenge with, because while I read a lot of nature writing, I wanted to try to read something else within the sciences for this. I sort of added the element to my nonfiction reading challenge in general to read only books by female authors. That also was an added difficulty with this pop science one. Not that there isn't female writers writing pop science. I didn't own many of them anyway. The book that I decided to go with for this challenge is Past Mortems, Life and Death Behind Mortuary Doors by Carla Valentine. So basically she writes from a pathologist's point of view in discussing the way that the body decays after death, human biology and the decay of human bodies. It is a fascinating book with a lot of details that I think would make for interesting reading for pretty much everyone, because it's something that we are all going to be some way or other connected with, and it might be put some people off because of its subject matter, but I found it fascinating and really fun. And the author has a lot of humor as well, which is something that I really appreciated. The next challenge I want to talk about is the book that I read for a read about something ordinary, and for that I chose How to Be a Victorian by Ruth Goodman. So this is a Victorian history set up in the way that it follows a person's day, basically. So it starts off with a person getting out of bed, and the first thing that they do when they do get out of bed. The setup itself is of course following an ordinary day, but also another aspect too that fits perfectly with the challenge is that it doesn't just follow rich people during the Victorian era, it follows all classes, all situations, all kinds of people. And I think a lot of the time when we are confronted with the Victorian era, we mostly get the privileged perspective. So I think in that sense also it works really splendidly for the ordinary challenge of just seeing what a person, an everyday person would be, how they would be living during the Victorian period. The next challenge I want to talk about is reading a translated nonfiction, and for that I have chosen Balladen on Marie Kroyer by Anastassia Arnold. So this is an interesting one for me because this book is actually translated but not into English. It is translated from the Danish to Swedish, and I don't think that it is available in English. But this is a biography of a woman who was married to a man called P.S. Kroyer, who was a really famous Danish painter at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And she was also later married to a Swedish composer, also equally famed and lauded for his work. She was a painter in her own right, but that was sort of put to the side when she was married to these two geniuses. This is in part a biography of a woman who almost made it. Almost Famous Women is the short story collection, just comes to my mind in terms of the concept of this book. But also it is sort of a portrait of women living during this period and the art scene of the late sort of the Edwardian time or the turn of the century kind of time period. This is something that I really love myself. For the challenge of reading a pre-Victorian history, I decided to go with Spineless, The Science of Jellyfish and the Art of Growing a Backbone by Juli Berwald. So this is a nature book or the natural history of the jellyfish, and the reason I thought of this as a pre-Victorian history is because of course the jellyfish is a lot older than the Victorian era. So this is about an ancient sort of life form, and I thought it was appropriate because a lot of the aquatic creatures that I'm interested in are very, very old kind of species, and that is sort of, that becomes quite relevant in books about them as well, sort of figuring out their heritage. And so I thought that was appropriate for going back in history much more than I would normally read about. And reading about aquatic creatures is something that I started doing this year, so this was one of the ones that I read. The next challenge that I want to talk about is the read a nonfiction classic, and originally I had thought of this as something, a book published before the 21st century, but I decided to go with The Center Cannot Hold, My Journey Through Madness by Elyn R. Sachs. So I think this was originally published in 2007, so not quite as old as I was initially planning, but I thought that actually this is a classic within the mental health or mental illness narrative. There's quite a few books now about mental illness from a personal experience and personal perspective on living with mental illness, and I feel like this is one of the classics of this form of writing. And it is referenced in my the Collected Schizophrenias, which is also why I decided to pick this up this year. I think it is a really interesting, very engaging and sort of amazing book. So if you're interested in the experience of schizophrenia, I would highly recommend it as well. The next challenge is, again, kind of an interesting one for me, and that is to read a book and then watch a documentary about something related to the topic. And so I decided to go with Blue Nights by Joan Didion. So I read read this book around the summertime, and this was my second attempt at reading Didion, and I didn't feel quite as connected with it as I want to be. I feel like Didion is one of those authors that I feel like I should be able to connect, and I just don't. So I decided to watch the documentary called The Center Will Not Hold, which is fitting since the previous book is called The Center Cannot Hold. So I decided to watch that documentary about Didion and her entire life the other day. And I found it amazing. I thought that the documentary was just spot on and beautiful and really interesting, and made me feel like I got a better sense of her as a writer and as a person as well. So I think I will try to give her books another go, and to sort of go at them again with more knowledge about her as a person, and feel like I more understand where she's coming from. So this was the case of the documentary actually helping me in appreciating the book rather than the opposite way. Then I had a challenge of reading a book, a nonfiction book about a place that you liked to go or visit, and I decided to go with Vanishing Fleece by Clara, which is a book all about the wool industry and sort of in the American setting, the creation of wool from the shearing of animals to the processing of the wool, and ultimately to the spinning, dyeing, and selling of wool. And basically I found this such an interesting sort of behind the scenes of the creation of wool that is definitely something that I would love to visit someday, to a sheep farm or a dyer's factory or something like that. Like, seeing these things in real life would be so amazing. I found this book such a useful book to have in mind when using wool and thinking about it as well, both from a sort of ethical and environmental and all kinds of perspectives. I think that it's a book that is doing something new and very important and useful thing. So it's a book that I think showed me a part of the world, sort of an industry that I really wanted to see up front, and I got to do that through the book. The last challenge of the nonfiction reading challenge this year is actually one that I'm still working on, but I think I will be able to finish it by the end of the year, which is still 3 days off, I think. And I thought that I would make this video now because I'm fairly certain that I will finish it by the end of the year, and it won't make any difference. I already have a pretty good sense of the book, and that is the challenge of reading a book on art or art history. And for that I've chosen Nutcracker Nation by Jennifer Fisher, which is a book all about ballet as an art form and the endless passion for the Nutcracker. So it sort of goes into both the Nutcracker as a Christmas tradition and why it's so strongly connected with Christmas, and also the endless fascination and passion for the ballet as it is, as well as talking about ballet as an art form and sort of something in between high and low art, something that is both sort of a privilege as well as something for everyone, especially in connection with the Nutcracker, which is something that of course the Nutcracker has endlessly been adapted into several ballets and movie adaptations and books and everything like that. And so this book is sort of looking only at this ballet and using that as a way to examine ballet itself as well. I've read about half of it, and I'm really enjoying the detail that it goes into. I think it isn't necessarily a book for everyone because it's so detailed in the deep dive in a very niche topic, but I'm enjoying that aspect of it. So those are all of the books that I've read for the nonfiction reading challenge since talking to you about them last. And as I said, I will link all of the playlist. I will link the playlist and also the 2020 nonfiction reading challenge video below if you're interested in it and want to know more. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas and have enjoyed these in-between calm days before the new year. I hope you're excited for 2020. I know I am. Yeah, that was all I wanted to say. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.